So there's three main types of weed control that we talk about in food plots. We've got chemical weed control, which is using herbicides to suppress or kill undesirable plants. We've got mechanical weed control, which is using, for example, tillage or cultivation to disturb the root systems of weeds and suppress them. And then we've got cultural weed control methods. And a common example of cultural weed control is using for example, no-till methods to create a thatch layer on the surface of the ground, which will suppress weeds from germinating underneath, but allow the planted species to push up through. One of the other examples of cultural weed control, which is arguably the cheapest and most effective, is balancing the deer density on your property with the amount of food on the landscape. And this food plot is an excellent example of that type of cultural weed control. You can see outside of where the exclusion cage was out here, we've got good establishment of our planted species, our clover and our cereal grains, but we've got a lot of annual ryegrass that's coming up in the middle. And that's just because the planted species have been eaten down to the ground and there was vacant growing space for weeds to colonize. Now contrast that with right here where our exclusion cage just was up until about 2 minutes ago when we moved it right before this video. And you can see that there are very few, if any, weeds coming up underneath of this really lush canopy of clover and cereal grains. So the best method of weed control in this situation would be simply either decrease the number of deer on this property so that the food plot can suppress weeds on its own, or provide more food on the landscape to better balance the number of mouths that are eating the food with the amount of food. And realistically, in most scenarios, it's going to be some combination of those two, where you're both reducing deer density and creating more high quality food sources, so that when you plant a food plot, you don't need expensive chemical methods of weed control or mechanical weed control. You can just simply limit the number of mouths on the landscape and allow the food plot to suppress its own weeds. Okay, so now we're on another property where the deer density relative to the amount of forage available is more in check. What I mean by that is that we do not have so many deer that they're overgrazing our food plot and our planted species. And because we've got really good active growth of our clovers and wheat in this food plot, there is not enough vacant growing space for weeds to establish.